Now, Campagnolo has announced Super Record S Wireless, a new road group set with a very competitive price of, drum roll please,
It's like $4,000.
$4,299 or €3,990. Now, the new group set offers a wider range of gearing choices at a very competitive price, Liam. That's very competitive, isn't it? Now, the Italian brand says that this lower price was achieved thanks to a more moderate use of extreme materials and a solid instead of a hollow carbon crankset, which Campagnolo claims adds just 150 grams to the overall group set weight. Now, the group set also debuts with a matte black finish, and there is a new range of matte edition Bora WTO and Bora Ultra WTO wheels to match. And today, Liam, we're going to discuss it. What does this mean for Campagnolo? Is this what we wanted? Is it cheap enough? And more. So, Liam, what are your headline thoughts on this new group set?
I saw this and I thought, have they lost the plot? Have they genuinely not looked at any of the other pricing in the market right now before they sent us the press release? It's weird that they're calling this a special edition. We've been discussing this and it feels a lot more like record to us rather than super record. And that almost suggests in a way that they're kind of not polishing a turd, but they're dressing. They're doing a bit of window dressing.
Yeah. Now, traditionally in Campagnolo's range, they've had Super Record right at the top, and then kind of below that has traditionally been its Record line. So it is, as you say, it's interesting that they're calling this kind of Super Record S, which, as Liam has just said, stands for Super Record sort of Special Edition. Because I don't think it's a limited edition. I think this is a kind of going to be a new addition to their lineup that's going to stay there. As far as we're aware, this isn't kind of limited to 1,500 group sets or anything like that. So it is slightly strange that they haven't called it Record. But I do wonder if, as you say, that's kind of something to do with pricing, because as we'll kind of come on to in a minute, this is kind of priced similarly to Dura Ace and SRAM Red rather than SRAM Force and Shimano Ultegra. So yeah, it's a slightly weird one. I think, as you said, like in the kind of tough economic times across the world, and a lot of people, particularly on our YouTube channel and the emails we get to our podcast, the people have been crying out for kind of more value-focused bikes and gear. And I don't think this is really that.
Yeah, I think there are wider questions about Campagnolo's kind of market position and kind of their aims long term, which we'll get to in a bit, but let's just kind of begin with some of the cold hard facts as we understand them.
Yeah.
So the weight and price versus the competitors. And are we kind of saying that Shimano Dura Ace and SRAM's Red is the competitor, or the Ultegra and Force kind of level components?
So I think Campagnolo would say that Super Record is above Dura Ace and SRAM Red axis, which I don't think is how everyone else sees it. No. But I think that's what they would say. So I think that they would, because traditionally I think they would position Record as a competitor to Dura Ace and SRAM Red. And so I think this is kind of like, trying to compete with that. In terms of price, it kind of, at RRPs just undercuts it. So it's, $4,299 or €3,990. And that compares to a Shimano Dura Ace R9200, the Di2 group set, which costs sort of £3,600, €3,400 or $4,300. Now, those are RRPs, and obviously we know that real-world prices for Shimano tend to differ greatly. In terms of SRAM, that's SRAM's newest red axis, obviously just been launched, around £4,000, $4,000, €4,100. So this is coming in slightly less than that, but it is significantly more expensive than something like Ultegra Di2 R8100, which costs around £2,300 at RRP and $2,400, or SRAM's Force axis, which is around £1,700, $2,100, or €1,900 at RRP.
And if you go online, you can pick up some ridiculous deals on Ultegra Di2 in particular. Like, what were you saying? What, 1,300 quid?
Yeah. If you go online today, you can get a full Ultegra Di2 group set at Merlin Cycles for around £1,300. Obviously other shops are available. You don't have to shop at Merlin if that's not available in your area. But so it's very clear that this is not going to compete with Ultegra or Force.
It's mad because I think there are two ways of really looking at this, and the price thing does need to be discussed here. because this feeds into Campagnolo's aims long term. They know their market, and they know their market is high end. And if you speak to bike brands these days, especially over the past few years, cheap bikes haven't been selling well. Mid-range bikes haven't been selling that well. But ultra high-end bikes have been flying off the shelves because cycling is a money sport.
Are you buying them all then?
Funnily enough, I am not. BikeRadar and cycling journalism in general does not pay incredibly well, but those high-end bikes are selling, and the people that buy those bikes want the Dura-Aces, they want the SRAM Reds, and they want Campagnolo Super Record. So in a sense, they know their market, and the price isn't really going to be an issue for that market. But there's a huge issue when it comes to getting newer riders onto Campagnolo and kind of into that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of like my concern. And I agree that, obviously if you're shopping for a 10 to 15,000 pound bike, you're probably fairly insensitive to price. You're picking the bike you want, and the budget probably doesn't matter that much, I would imagine. I've no idea. I've never shopped for a bike that expensive. But my concern would be that, so this is, nominally a kind of second tier group set from Campagnolo. It's kind of weighing, 2,670 grams. That's kind of based on our calculations of, because they haven't actually told us. They just said it's 150 grams heavier than Super Record Wireless. So we've kind of just added that to the claimed weight. We don't have individual component weights yet. But both Dura-Ace and SRAM are lighter. Dura-Ace weighs around 2,579 grams, including a power meter and a BB. SRAM Red is 2,548 grams in a sort of similar spec. So it's kind of heavier than those. And I wonder if the person who's wants the best of the best and they're willing to pay for it. I know it's a tiny amount of weight and it probably doesn't make any difference. But it's kind of like, if you're shopping for a 12 grand bike, do you want something that's nominally second tier? And I think, Campagnolo does seem to be increasingly, especially on the roadside, focusing on its like high-end customer. And, obviously that's fine. There's plenty of luxury brands in the world who focus on those, only those high-end customers. But I think with something like cycling, traditionally people have started out with cheaper bikes and then, you trade up. And I wonder if, there's obviously lots of Campagnolo fans from the past when Campagnolo was dominating the top of the sport. But now with Campagnolo out of the World Tour and, off most mainstream bikes, if you go on to buy like a Specialized Tarmac SLA or a Trek Madone SLR or, the new Canyon Air Road or something like that, any of the bikes that you'll see at the Tour de France, they're not spec'd with, you can't get them with Campagnolo.
Yeah, you can maybe get like one variety, but it's few and far between.
Maybe there'll be a special edition most likely, and they just don't exist because Campagnolo does still have cheaper mechanical group sets, but with the way that road bikes are going these days, we're just not seeing those spec'd
a lot of frames and front ends just aren't compliant with mechanical.
Yeah, exactly. And so my worry for Campagnolo is that it's kind of increasingly, the more it goes down this path, the more it kind of cuts itself off from new fans entering into the kind of Campagnolo ecosystem. And then that, like, when that kind of, die-hard core of Campagnolo fans dies off, who's going to, like, replace them?
But also, like, current Campagnolo fans, I appreciate that a lot of them will be relatively wealthy or just willing to spend that amount of money on a group set. But our good friend Oscar, he's not made of money, but he's a big Campagnolo fan. Yeah. So this probably alienates him too.
Yeah, he's not going to buy this, is he?
Oh, I don't know. He might save his pennies.
Yeah, maybe. But I did, like as you say, he's just a kind of like a young guy with a job. I doubt he's going to push the boat out to buy this, and I think he'd probably be slightly disappointed. Obviously we're not talking about whether it's a good group set, whether it performs well. I'm sure Campagnolo will say you're essentially getting the same performance as Super Record Wireless, but significantly cheaper and only 150 grams more weight. And so if you put it that way, I guess that's quite good. There are more chainring and cassette choices with this.
This I love, by the way.
Yeah, so because previously with Super Record Wireless, you only had like relatively small chainring options of 45-29, 48-32 and 50-34. But now, and I think because of like pressure from fast amateurs and kind of professional riders. They have added 52.36, 53.39, and 54.40.
I love this because I think it shows that Campagnolo is actually listening to its customer base, but also its former professional riders. Because we saw Ben O'Connor when the current Super Record wireless came out, and he was using his standard, old chain set because the pro gearing just wasn't available on the new stuff. And I think more than any other group set brand, Campagnolo is so tied to that heritage of professional racing, and customers from Campagnolo will probably go out and buy gearing that maybe isn't suitable to them, because that's what the pros use and that's what the heroes use, and that's part of cycling for them, as it is for so many of us, kind of like using what Pantani rode or whoever, or Ben O'Connor.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see more options. The cassettes available for this group set are 10 to 27, 10 to 29, and then a new 11 to 32, which is kind of interesting. I think that's a good cassette. I still wonder if SRAM and Shimano offers an 11.34 at Dura Ace. SRAM offers an 11 to 36. So Campagnolo obviously still wants those kind of like tighter cassettes, and I think if you want an easier climbing gear, it's trying to encourage you to go with smaller chain rings, basically. So you can't kind of get the, as we're in pro racing, we're seeing a lot of pro riders go for kind of big chain rings up front paired with like a wide range cassette out the back to kind of like get the best of both worlds. But I think Campagnolo still wants to encourage riders to size down. And, as you say, that may be a performance benefit, but that kind of, it's nice for people to get the choice. Now, in terms of everything else, like we kind of don't know.
I was just about to say, we have covered everything that we know. The rest of the podcast or the video is literally everything we don't know.
Yeah, Campagnolo hasn't really talked about the kind of performance of this group set in terms of like shifting speed. They've not said that it's any better or any worse than Super Record Wireless. Can probably assume it's going to be the same. I think, they've said they've made, more moderate use of extreme materials. The finish of the derailleurs and the brakes looks basically identical. The construction looks basically identical, but the finish looks slightly different. So I would assume that the kind of carbon fibre used to wrap the derailleurs and stuff is maybe a cheaper, lower modulus or something, whatever.
I have to say, I like that in a way, because I've always found Campagnolo's braking, while I don't love the ergonomics of the levers, the actual action of the braking is really, really nice. But also their rotors have, for years and years and years, just been super solid. Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely one of the things that Oscar, our kind of Campagnolo mega fan here at BikeRadar, has always said, is that he thinks that Campagnolo has the best hydraulic disc brakes. I've not used them, but I have heard excellent things about the rotors. I think they're kind of like slightly heavier.
You probably haven't heard anything of them because they are actually quite quiet in all weathers. They are genuinely good rotors.
But beyond the derailleurs, the kind of, the shifter layout is the same. So there's no return of the kind of thumb shifter. You've got the same kind of 2-button on the brake levers. There is a matte finish. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I kind of always associate Campagnolo with kind of everything unnecessarily wrapped in carbon, and I really liked it, or constructed from carbon, when you'd go, are you sure metal wouldn't have been
so it's still carbon, but it just has a matte finish instead of a kind of glossy finish. I guess they needed some way to differentiate it. They've also launched, as I said, some kind of new wheels, the Bora and Bora Ultra WTO wheels, but these look to basically be exactly the same.
I would like to say, if you go out and buy the matte versions of the Bora WTO wheels, I will find you. Those original WTO wheels are just so beautiful to look at, especially if it's a sunny day or something.
But you can't have gloss wheels with a matte group set, can you? Is that not sacrilegious?
I don't know. Even if you can pair gloss wheels with a matte frame, that's got to be bad as well.
Yeah, okay.
The police will be out for us.
So, I think like the kind of, the big question, I think we're always hoping to answer with Campagnolo whenever they launch anything new, is kind of like, is this going to be enough to like reverse its trajectory of kind of like decline from the mainstream of road cycling?
I think there are elements here that say yes, and there are elements missing that would indicate no. And personally, to call that price point, very competitive, is kind of saying we've lost the plot. That is ridiculous. But I love that they've gone back to more traditional kind of gearing setups. I really like that, because that shows that they're listening to their customers. The rest, I'm not sure. I would love to see Campagnolo bring this technology down to a price point that I think you or I could kind of say, okay, this is now a direct competitor for Ultegra and Force, because Ultegra and Force are so good these days. I wouldn't, recommend to anyone to go out and look anywhere else.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and I kind of like, I think this might be enough for Campagnolo to get back on bikes on the shop floor. Because you go to a nice bike shop, you will see Dura Ace bikes, you will see SRAM Red bikes, and as you said, they do sell well. But since it launched, Campagnolo Super Record Wireless has not been spec'd on many mainstream bikes that you buy in the shops. There have been, if you go on Canyon's website, for example, they have a kind of a range of special edition Campagnolo Super Record Wireless bikes that are kind of like separate from, their like main ones. But like if you're just looking at their kind of stock, those are kind of limited edition bikes. And if you're just looking at their kind of like stock list of bikes, you can't get a Tarmac SL8 with Campagnolo Super Record Wireless, for example. I believe they only did that kind of, I think they only did that like 15 grand special edition S-Works AFOS.
That's where I might have seen it.
So, we've seen it spec'd on bikes like that, but there are only like sort of 200 of those available. Now, I'm sure Specialized sold every one, but it's not enough that, if I go to my local group ride next weekend, I don't think I'll see anyone on a Super Record Wireless group set, for example. So if Super Record S Wireless can get Campagnolo back onto bikes at kind of like similar prices to Dura Ace and SRAM Red, I think that will be a good thing. But my worry is that I think if you've got that kind of money, then Super Record S Wireless is still going to be a really tough sell compared to something like Dura Ace or the latest SRAM Red Axis, because Super Record Wireless, the more expensive group set, is still relatively unproven. We've not seen it raced in the World Tour. We've not had a group set in for review. You don't see it out and about. So you can't ask anyone, like, is this as good as Dura Ace or SRAM Red Access? We can't tell you if we think it's as good as Dura Ace or SRAM Red Access, because we just don't know. I can sit here and tell you that, oh yeah, I love Dura Ace, and we can talk to Warren, our colleague, and he'll say, yeah, SRAM Red Access is just as good. So if you prefer the ergonomics of the new shifters, or you like the way it looks, you can go for that, and you're not losing any performance. We can have those conversations based on evidence and things that we have like tested and things that we know. Super Record S Wireless and Super Record Wireless are much more unknowns for me. And would I be willing to spend, 10, 12, 14,000 pounds on something that, you're not sure if it's going to be the best?
I really miss the days, let's say, Campagnolo's final kind of rim brake mechanical shifting group set. I had a couple of bikes with that on in for testing, and that was such a peach of a group set. It looks beautiful, it works beautifully, and there was always a sense with Campagnolo, Shimano and SRAM, they wear out, Campagnolo wears in. That was always the saying that was in the bike shops. How does that work? But it was largely true. It kind of aged like a lovely wine.
There's too many cliches, Liam.
Too many cliches. I'll get back to.
Never have enough.
I'll get back to a serious thought. In that, I feel like this new stuff is going to be the hardest sell. Is going to be selling this to Campagnolo fans, because if you've got enough money for this new group set, you've probably got enough money for the all singing, all dancing Super Record Wireless.
Yeah, and if you don't, then you probably don't have enough money for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the kind of the really tricky thing with this. And we don't want to be too down on Campagnolo, because I think we're fans and we want the brand to do well. We want Shimano and SRAM to have competition. You know, those brands, you know, they're not perfect. We're not trying to act like everything that they do is great. You know, having a third group set manufacturer in that big three is really good, because it means that it gives us more options as kind of, you know, riders. So,
and it gives us more things to talk about.
yeah, which is always important. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. Well, I think that is about it. As I said, that's kind of, you know, there's still plenty we don't know. We hope we're going to get this group set in for review, but we haven't had Super Record Wireless in yet, so who knows. All right, well, thanks very much for watching. Thanks for joining me today, Liam.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to watch another video, just click on the little one above Liam's head.